Um, so here we go on step 4. Next, we launch out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and get rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. Well, why? Who the hell cares? Why can't I just quit drinking? Some of this they took straight out of the Bible, the book of James. Other parts of this is really a complete mental health program, a complete behavioral modification program. That's really what's going on here. So we started upon personal inventory. This was step 4. And then he goes into, Bill Wilson writes this down because he was a business guy. A business which takes no regular inventory goes broke. Taking commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It's an effort to discover the truth about our stock and trade. So he's trying to appeal to the mostly businessmen, alcoholics, who started attending AA in the 1930s. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods to get rid of them promptly without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. So we took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws. Well, don't I need a therapist to do this or a psychiatrist? Apparently not. I mean, they like to do that and they like to charge you 250. What is it now? 250 an hour? Is that what anybody raise your hand if you know how much? What do therapists and psychologists cost these days? Anybody know? No, but nobody's been to one here. Uh, JT, okay, what do they cost, JT?
I was going to a therapist for 6 months,
Yeah,
paying about $100 an hour.
$100
And
an hour. That's in France. What about in the United States? Rebecca, how much the therapist cost of her videos, throws notes in?
It's you're right. It's about 250 an hour.
250.
Yeah.
Do you know when I went it was 20?
Yeah.
Well, that was back in 1975, you idiot. I know. Okay. Anyway, here you get to do it for free. You just send us $1 into the basket, and you get the best therapy money could buy. We did exactly the same. We took various we because we're convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us. I think they're referring to self-obsession. Alcoholism seems to really produce this. So then he goes on to say, page 64, last paragraph, resentment's the #1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. Excuse me, I have acid reflux that causes me to hiccup sometimes. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. So he talks about the spiritual malady, and a lot of us go, what? Well, we were talking about that back in step 3 yesterday and some of the past days. And in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, and principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, we found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. Now, this is a time when Bill Wilson, our co-founder, was communicating with the famed Austrian psychiatrist Carl Jung. So I'm sure some of this came from Jung. I don't know why Bill got in touch with Carl Jung, but he did. And I think at the time, Young had not left Vienna. Uh, the Nazis were taking over. He was still there. So they were writing letters back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambition, our personal or sex relationships which had been interfered with? We were usually as definite as this example. So why the heck, this was my question, why do I even have to do this? And, I mean, so, okay, fine. But, if you're going to make me do this, and then I'm going to put down my father, well, why do I don't even want to talk about that. I don't want to think about that. So I don't know. They came up with something decent here. So you may have somebody that you really don't want to think about or write about, but meanwhile, it's asking us to do that. But I think what happens here is there's a certain freedom at the end of the fourth step and fifth step, where these people that were driving us crazy or situations start to be removed. So I'm resentful. So he says here in this example, I'm resentful at Mr. Brown. Why? Because his paid attention to my wife, and that's going to affect my sex relations and self-esteem. Well, what is self-esteem? I think it's like what we believe in ourselves, right? It's what we hold ourselves, to be. And then there's some fear connected with that. The fear might be I'm going to lose my wife. So I'm still resentful at Mr. Brown. He told my wife of my mistress. God, I hate it when that happens. That affects sex relations, self-esteem. Bill Wilson had this thing about sex. He was a philanderer and he was really caught up in it. Not everybody is, but he puts it down as a major thing for him. Still resentful at Mr. Brown. Brown may get my job at the office. That affects his security, self-esteem. Then the next person is Mrs. Jones. She's a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking. He's my friend. She's a gossip. And what does this affect in him? It's his personal relationships um, with his friend, and it affects his self-esteem. He's got a resentment against his employer, unreasonable, unjust, overbearing, threatens to fire me for drinking, padding my expense account. And so this affects his self-esteem or his belief in himself, right? And his sense of security. Then he has a resentment against his wife. She doesn't understand him. She nags. She likes Brown, wants house put in her name. And this affects his pride, personal sex relationships, security, and fear. And there are other areas that it affects back over here on page 64. So then what we do in the fourth step is we write these things down in 4 columns. We make this actually 5 columns. Like I've done it on lined paper. Let's see if I have it here. We had the diagram. Do we still have that? Where's Lance? Lance was here, but he left. You don't have the diagram, do you, Preston? Do you have the diagram?
No, I don't have his. I've got my fourth step with me though.
Well, I want to show the 4 columns that we usually, the 5 columns that we write out. Here they are. So what we usually do here is we'll do 5 columns similar to this. Okay. And then you write in each column. So the first column would be I'm resentful at. The second column would be the cause. The third column is what it affects. Then the fourth column is my part. And the fifth column is my fears in connection to a resentment. We went back through our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing that was apparent was, here it is, the world and its people are often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and stayed sore. Okay, the world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong, that was as far as most of us got. So we need to go beyond that. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victors only seemed to win. Our moment of triumph was short-lived. So now for all of you who haven't done a fourth step yet, you're going to start working on this today. Okay. It's plain that life, which includes deep resentment, leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, the business of resentment is infinitely grave. So we're going to refer back now to the third step, what we just read yesterday, where he talks about the new power that flows in, this new peace of mind. That's the spiritual experience. So you've got to have the third step spiritual experience first before you do your fourth step. We found that it is fatal, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. So here's that discussion about the spirit again. Yesterday, we read and talked about the sun, is it the sunlight of the spirit that goes on about, Jeff, at the end of the goes on about the end of this. Let's see, page 160. Is it 164? There it is. Yeah. See, he talks about they talk about abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults. There it is. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of the past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. Fellowship of the Spirit. So this is that's why AA is a fellowship. This really is like a Christian fellowship. It's like a fellowship of the Spirit. And so that's what they're talking about here. So the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seems to win. On page 66. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, we found it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit again. The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. So this is a pretty serious business we're talking about. They're mixing in kind of a form of mental health, a form of confession, a form of spirituality. All of this is a process to dismantle the madness of alcoholism and let some sanity flow into us. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. We return back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us, and that state of wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, it actually had the power to kill us. So if we wake up every morning all pissed off at everybody and everything, then we go and we're going to get a drink, and that's the power to kill us. We start doing that over and over. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered. Wow. But how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. This is our course. Okay. Now he goes on to say that we realize the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Maybe. But if you're an alcoholic, at least myself, I could find anything to be annoyed at anytime. It doesn't really matter. It could be exes, it could be the government, it could be the cable company, it could be my job, because we just do that. We just have that stuff ruminating. So though we did not like the symptoms, they disturbed us, like ourselves, we of course we were sick. Yeah, this is a form of mental illness. Alcoholism is a form of mental illness with an addiction connected to it. So here he says we ask God to help us show this. So now we're back to this thing called God that we described in step 3. And now we're going to ask it for tolerance, pity, patience. When a person is offended, we say to ourselves, this is a sick man. Well, maybe he's sick, maybe he's not. How can I be helpful to him? Really, I don't want to help them. I want to kill them. It depends who it is. God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. So what's thy will? For our purposes, praying for God's will simply is staying sober, coming to this meeting, and working the program. So next part is we avoid retaliation. There's a lot in here about the 4th step, huh? We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. Well, I don't know why. See, Bill seems to want to think that the rest of the world is sick, not just us. I'm not entirely sure. I think we're the alcoholics, and we foisted our crazy life on the world. But somehow he wants to make our victims ill, like they deserved it. No, they didn't. We cannot be helpful to all people. Well, he thinks that we want to be helpful to everybody. In the middle of my 4th step, I don't think I want to be helpful to anybody. Maybe around step 12 I do. But at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. Maybe. So here we go. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs other has done. We resolutely looked at at our own mistakes. Here we go. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? So in the column that says my part here, guys, the 4th column over, you're going to write down in each situation, where had I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and afraid? Though the situation had not been entirely my fault. He keeps going back to that, which I think what he's getting at is alcoholics like to blame everybody for their problems. So he's always like letting you off the hook a little bit here. It's a slight con. Where were we to blame? Okay, that's true. The inventory was ours, not the other person. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. How about that? Notice the word fear is bracketed alongside difficulties with Mr. Brown. So now you're going to do a 5th column called the fear inventory. Fear was this evil and corroding thread, the fabric of which was shot through with it. He goes on more about fear. So on page 68, the 2nd paragraph here, we reviewed our fears thoroughly. You want to bracket this. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. So this is what I like to call free-floating fears. Fear, like just everything. You ever wake up with fear, like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose my job. I'll be alone for the rest of my life. No one will ever care about me. I'm going to be broke. I'm going to be a homeless person. Wasn't it because well, let me see, talks about self-reliance. He's back over to this. They keep switching you to having a dependence on a higher power, this force that can come into your life and help heal you up. I mean, you don't hear about this in therapy or psychiatry, but they sure talk about it here. Perhaps there is a better way, we think so. Second paragraph. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role he assigns. Just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely upon him, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity. He goes on to say, we never apologize to anyone for depending upon our creator. And then, I don't know, let me see here. We never apologize for God, yet we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. This is back to this evangelical deep relationship with God or with Christ. I mean, a lot of times we get to the fourth step in here where we're not at this level, not at the level Bill was at when he wrote this. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to those he would have to what he would have us be. So that's a good prayer, removing fear at once we outgrow fear. Then he goes on into what's called the sex inventory here, which I'm not going to go into because it triggers people. You know, it's a bad move to bring that up in a mixed group like this. But we will talk about page 69. We reviewed our own conduct over the years. So this, you can do this part of the inventory. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? So this is in the my part. You can answer these questions about everyone with them. You know, did I justifiably, is there such a thing as justifiable? Jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What could we have done instead? So we got this all done on paper. So you want to put this in the my part, and you want to bracket this part on page 69. Who did I hurt? And where did I cause jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? What could I have done instead? So there it is. That's basically, he talks about more about this fourth step here. And you can read more about this. So, I mean, people go to therapy and psychoanalysis for years to come up with this. These guys came up with it like in, well, I think with the help of Carl Jung and maybe a few other people, they came up with it in a few pages, but it seems to work out pretty well. So who has experience with the fourth step and fifth step? How did it work out for you? How about you, Matt? What was your experience and how did the fourth and fifth step work out? Did it work out at all?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I'm not a person that has a ton of resentments at everything, so I had a few of them. And
Okay.
And then going forward, just recognizing, taking the time to take an inventory and then as
What
you
about your part? Where had you been wrong, selfish, and dishonest? Did you write about that?
yeah, I mean, I can't even remember, but I mean it was basically I mean the alcohol, there was always creeping in there. I mean, a lot of it was caused by alcohol. I mean, um, the dishonesty and it just is like a really poison, so it's like poisons your life. So it was once that's sort of out of there. I mean, that was a big part of it for me, just
Okay, stop right
poisoning
there.
relationships.
How about you there, Preston?
Yeah, for me, and I'm still doing a deep dive in this, it's really the fourth and fifth step really revealed like my deep character defects that just like the book says that led to a lot of my problems. Like just yeah, there are tons of them, just twisted thinking, which then results in my actions, how I hurt people and all that stuff. So it's a lot deeper, the longer I stay sober, those problems.
Okay, Jeff, how about your take on what we just read and your fourth step?
Yes, Jeff, alcoholic. Getting a lot out of it. Yeah, I have to realize that because I was selfish and self-centered, because I wasn't able to see what was really going on in my life, I made wrong judgments about people. I was made wrong judgments, just like it says in the book about ways I was acting wrong and wondering why things weren't working out. Why weren't they understanding where I was coming from? Like they didn't have a place to come from in my mind. All this sort of thing. And then you just totally, you take that natural born defect, and then you just muddle it with the alcohol, and it's a disaster. You wonder why things are falling apart.
Yeah, yeah, and I like that too. You know, I had certain opinions about certain people,
Yes.
long held opinions about what they did. And it wasn't until I was able to do a fourth step and a fifth step, and then a sixth and seventh step around my own character defects, did I see that they actually maybe they were trying to do the best they could and really be decent to me, but I had held so much hatred and resentment, I could never see it. You know, I had sometimes we'll frame people as evil monsters when in fact they're maybe, you know, they're just regular people. Let's see who else made it through this fourth and fifth. Oh, JT, you did a complete fourth and fifth step, is that right?
Yes, I did with Preston and another gentleman. I can't remember who.
Okay,
Yep.
so what rings true for you on this today?
100% the most thing is the selfishness. So I was thinking about my ego and my insecurities, and that the resentment was fueled by fear, and the fear was getting my selfish ends. And the thing about stepping on your toes, I was like the toe stepper master. You know, I really know how to step on people's toes. I don't even have to try, and I can like land right on their little toe with like a heel or something.
All right, stop right there. Uh, so Cassie, how about you? Can you talk? So how about your experience with the fourth and fifth step?
Yeah, I was really scared going into it, talking with my sponsor about the fifth step, but it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders the next day. And I realized that my pattern of was mostly self-seeking and selfish in the actions I had, and that my biggest resentment column was the resentments I had with myself.
Oh, okay. All right, good. So how did you like today's reading? Pretty
It was good.
powerful stuff, huh?
Yeah, it's always great to revisit the fourth step. I know a lot of people are scared of it and they shouldn't be.
All right. Okay, good. Thank you. Excellent.
Thanks.
All right, we are out of time. And if you'd like to read the promises there, Matt.
Sure, man, alcohol. These are the promises on page 83 of the big book. We are painstaking about this phase of our development. We will be amazed before we are halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They'll always materialize if we work for them.
Okay, thank you. And here comes the serenity prayer. It goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So this meeting is officially over. And if anybody has any questions about Newcomer Slipper Step Workshop or about AA or this meeting, you can unmute and ask away.
Jan, we may want to text Rochelle, see if she is done. I know she's not here tonight for the fifth step.
Oh, in Australia?
Yeah, maybe late for her, but
No, she
Please do.
texted me earlier this morning. So,
okay,
but we're only gonna do one fifth step with one person at a time. So
okay,
we'll do yours tomorrow, 10 o'clock my time,
great. Thanks, good
and
evening.
noon your time. All right. Okay. Sounds
Thank you,
good.
everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.
See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye. Oh my God, Debbie has a weasel. Right now, whatever it
See
is.
you tomorrow.
All right. Okay. Bye. There you go. Hey, Travis, how'd you like today's meeting? Pretty cool, huh?
Good. I was glad to be here.
Yeah.
So
You're welcome to come back.
oh
come
yes,
for-
I'm definitely saving this meeting.
Come for 5 days and then we'll put you to work. Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah. You've been to AA before?
Yeah, I've been trying to stick to it this time, not you
All
know.
right. Well, this is definitely the place to be. This is a newcomer slippers step workshop. So it works out. This meeting works out pretty well for people. You'll see.
Is this every Saturday at
No,
the same
every
time?
day.
Oh, every day?
Every day. Every
Same
day.
time?
Same bat time. Would you put up a link to the meeting there, Matt? You have that? Yeah, we're here every day. It's called Newcomer Slipper Step Workshop. Every day, or if you look in your computer, up in the top is a shield, a little green shield. You scroll over it and it says meeting information. And then it shows you how to save it. And Matt just put a link up to it right here in chat for you also.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So, and Barry, how about you? How'd you like today?
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I liked it. It seemed pretty interesting. I'd like to keep coming back.
Well, come for 5 days. Yeah, just show up every day.
Yeah, sure.
You know, all right.
How do we get a verification letter
Oh,
that I was
we'll put the email up for you. You're right to stepworkshop1@gmail.com. Okay.